welcome back. It's taken me a couple of days to read through it, and as expressed by one or two of my audience, members of my audience, members of my group, so on and so forth, it's taken me a few days to read through this because it's not about reading it to give you a response. A good portion of you will have already figured this out. When I read something, I'm not the world's fastest reader, but what separates me from speed reading or speed readers is that when I read a document, I read including the is, the it, the at, the therefores, right? Because what I'm actually doing is learning to understand, or come to understand, exactly what's going on within the document. I'm identifying the writer. I'm identifying the intent behind that document itself. I'm looking for many different aspects within that document, which I'm going to cover in a moment. Now, I feel the document, like I said in the last video and other videos, it's not always about politics. Not news in general terms of speaking, it's usually informational stuff to help yourselves to get on through your life the best way that you can and you want. However, this time it is politically related. The idea is that I've generally just left politics alone because it can be a little bit of a ball, but nonetheless, if everybody's getting along to one extent or another, well, as long as everybody's talking, then it's a lot more interesting, whether it be from one side of the world through to the other. Yeah. Now, the document itself that we're referring to is the Withdrawal Agreement. Politics in itself is about the European Union and United Kingdom, or now they're knowing themselves as, or wanting themselves to be known as in the document as the Union. We're going to walk through that document, but we're not going to do it in too much detail because the idea is not to take up too much of your time doing this. Right, now, in other things, for instance, political shifts, we've noticed it right from the United States, where the Democrats and the Republicans are now beginning to level the playing field with each other for one reason or another, which I'm not going to go into, right across to other parts of the world, leaders trying to sort out problems, whether it be, spying or not spying, as it may be, and loads and other stuff I'm not going to go into here. Right, there's been a lot of other things, like for instance the fires, which credit given certainly where it's due for firefighters and those who have lost their homes and are trying to rebuild their lives, right through to earthquakes, tsunamis and so on and so forth. It is a very difficult time, as I mentioned right at the beginning of the year. You're going to see and face many challenges. Not trying to be prophetic, but things are the way they are. Past has a way of catching up with people in one capacity or another. It can be said some of it's unjust, others it is. But environmental initiatives and so on and so forth being what they are, they're trying to help out, to try and steady things out and clean things up, which is a good thing. There's loads and loads of stuff. Right. As far as language goes, I knew in the last one or two that there was one or two colourful words used, but I have found this. So if indeed that I do find myself using those same colourful words again, I will block them out. Okay? Not being too PC, of course, because at the end of the day, it's just all about genuine expression, as we were saying before, in authenticity. Now, to lead us into this document, and we're using the terms authenticity, It's looking at things like existentialism and essence. Essence being the nature of the Brexit. You could say it's a divorce versus a breach of contract. Now, either which way, whichever variation you wish to choose, it triggered a referendum. You all know that, just so forgive me, bear with me, we'll roll through, and the idea is effectively we make a nice rounded picture as to what's going on. Right, so what we say about a referendum, the referendum was based on many different things, right? So a lot of the time people would say it's because of the nature of it all, we call it a divorce, based on the historical factors, it's a breach of contract, or otherwise a frustration of said contract. Referendum is based on various things born from the past, whether it be financially related, politically related, economically related, whatever it may be, right down to the crux of the matter people have brought up, including myself, over the months, years as it is now, that it went from the EC and then evolved into the EU. And whilst referendums were held in order to enter into the EC, let's just skip a page before entering into it. Right. A lot of people have got to remember is this all started a long time back. Without getting into the story of it all, we're talking the 1950s. So after World War II had finished and various economic states were collapsing and various other weapons were being developed and so on, all the little things, you've got treaties like the European Atomic Treaty, right? So Euratom. From there, based on really trying to fast track the building of economic states from investing so much into the prior two world wars, you see things like the European Communities Act, or the EC. Then you have the Schengen Agreement, Montreal Protocol, Maastricht Treaty. And it's at this point where people have brought up the fact that, granted, 1970s or 72 to 75, the referendum may have been held to protect and otherwise rebuild economies and so on and so forth, to a point where many years then pass. Then the Maastricht Treaty of 1992 to 2009, and the reason I say 2009 is because that's when the Lisbon Treaty was formed. But between 72 and 92, people agreed to enter into a common community, a common market across the European bloc. However, because of things that have been going on, and because people have realised that these things actually work and so on and so forth, it's evolved into other agreements. And because of the way that's panned out, people have realised that they're now a part of something that they didn't originally agree on. Right? That's then the foundation, and everything else on top of that, what we spoke about a moment ago. So by the time you've actually finished, it does work out to be a form of frustration of contract. Then you've got your Lisbon Treaty, and then you've got various other referendums and proposals and so on and so forth, like currency change from sterling to the euro, things like that. So now you've got a basis in which to work with on this. Effectively, we have now reached today's date, so up to 2016, referendums taken hold, a vote was cast, a vote was made, outcomes, so on and so on and so forth. The decision is to withdraw. It's going to be an arduous task. It's going to be a difficult task, to say the least, for both the European Union and the United Kingdom. And as you'll have all come to aware of so far, especially for those who have maintained the path with me, that I've always taken a utilitarian perspective, or rather I've always remained in the middle ground as a business development consultant. Yeah? Or rather, in a manner of speaking, a consultant to ensure that both sides, or any party, one, are being heard, two, are understood, and three, a resolve is being drawn which is suitable for all parties involved. Also understanding that sometimes it's not about finding an instantaneous resolve, it's actually finding a turn-based resolve. So what you've actually got is a short-term and a long-term plan. Yeah? So everything moves forward in accordance to everybody's expectations. Yeah? Using analogies about a buffet and so on and so forth, or using food analogies, it's quite literally an example, and it is quite literally the same as. It is quite literally everybody piling to the kitchen counter and all want serving at the same time. It's not going to happen, is it? You'll form an orderly queue and everybody gets dealt with as and when they turn up. Yeah, so that's the turn-based. Yeah. There are many other variations and examples that can be used, but that's the basic one. Right, now that being said, the idea is that this needs, obviously the referendum has taken hold, negotiations have been happening since 2016, we're now 2018, so 2 years in, or a year and a half in, and effectively, you know, it's getting there. There is something, well, there's something on the table, right? So retrospectively, looking at all of this, it's good to see that a lot of other people have been reading this, and I have one here. This is the BBC one. I would like to think that they're maintaining their reputation, and there's been no reason why they shouldn't. So I've brought theirs up. However, the document in itself, so this is where we move into now, into the document itself, and you will find that as part of the links, the links actually with this video, right? And again, over at YouTube, you'll find it there. And the document itself, the document that's been analysed, is actually, as it's headed, as the 14th of November 2018 TF50 2018 55 Commission to EU 27. In other words, it is the Withdrawal Agreement drafted in November 2014 for the purpose of presentation to both the EU Commission and the 27 members, as well as the United Kingdom's populace. Right. As I've done with all other documents, such as the one I did with the World Bank, if I do copy anything out of the documents, they are within their entirety, and if I do edit them, what I do is just edit them simply for readability reasons, right? It's just the way people, sometimes it's the way people talk. It might make sense to them, and it does, in a manner of speaking, make sense, but it doesn't make it as readable to a broader audience. So I generally just tweak things, yeah? But it does not change the context of that, either paragraph, page, or whatever it's addressing. You'll also find that there have been expressions used throughout, like mutatis mutandis. What I have done is actually any particular French or Latin, Greek terms that have been used, that are frequently used within legal documents, I've provided you with links in this document further on in as to what they mean. Right. Now I'm not going to sit here and explain them all to you. I'll be here all day otherwise, won't I? Right. Now a lot of this, there's a lot of the amount of legal versing and chaptering to reduce or otherwise to ensure they have covered as many repetitive cycling bases or motions, laws and regulations as possible. As applied here, unless something does need addressing without prejudice, usage is to signal that they would not like to make this, not like to enter into a legal battle. Otherwise wish to place the development of this agreement under trust of both parties, in that both parties can reach an amicable resolve. Right? Again, you're not going to get it right first time. Right? Don't forget, 2 years is a short period of time to iron out or otherwise address what have we got here. 50, 60 years worth of political and economic contractual development. Yeah, 60 years, that's a lot of years. Yeah. Alright, first, we've also got to remember is what something says and what that same thing means is both subjective and open to interpretation, and amongst others. Yeah, amongst many different people. So amongst others, I've given you 4 different business entities, one varying description or another, giving their interpretation as to what this withdrawal agreement means. Yeah. Right. Observations: while being par for course, in any such situation, supervision is needed now and in the future. Hence the reason why Shadow Crown Services has been around since 2009 and has actually been watching or otherwise supervising the progression of political activities within this country and informing other member states as well as other countries around the world as to the best practices and how to move forward, how to see something beyond what it is they're being told by perhaps their normal counterparts, and help them to really kind of like, you know, build up and start working together. Right, now the next 3 paragraphs I've put in because of something that I actually found further on in the document, but it's also to reinforce why I, or Shadow Crown, does these things. And as I place here, Shadow Crown Services, or SCS, has remained to be both independent and impartial. For nearly 10 years, SCS's participation has also proven to be useful, realistic, yet is also void of any relationships with any political groups and or persons, and has acted as supervisor for progressive social, economic and political development, and that's both nationally and internationally from here in the UK. Meaning literally, again, arcing back to 2009, as the idea is that it needed to happen. The call was made, the call was answered. And for the last 10 years, as I was maintaining or specified in the last video, we've maintained our agreement. On this side of things, I've honoured my agreement, and within the unravelling of this process, you've maintained yours. So in one capacity or another, we've worked well together. I say work well together indirectly, you know, but again, it's there, isn't it? So SCS is able to short and long range forecast as well as plan, able to project manage, read, understand and write, otherwise rewrite legal documents, documentations, even read between the lines too. That being said, and evidence being, obviously people are going to want to know the evidence of it. Again, arcing back to the beginning, reading through particular legal documents, past experiences, yada 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 yada, the rest that goes with it. Inside 3 pages, I was able to lock down an entire system. Yeah. So that within itself actually shows that not only can legal documents be read, understood, and wrote to serve its purpose, but it's not made maliciously. There's always this sense of flexibility within all. So basically, SCS, as part of its independence and general participation so far, is a proven and time-served authority entity figure that will not buckle under pressure, with a focus that is purely utilitarian. In other words, it will always try to find the best resolve for all involved. Again, much like we were saying about the turn-based system, if one cannot be found literally for everybody at the same time, a time plan program will be put in place to ensure that everybody's issues or problems or needs are addressed. Has and does ensure there's no hidden intent, like we've done with a few of the documents that we've read through and presented for you. Best practices are either worked with and or taught, and see fairness and equality is applied and or otherwise adhered to. Yeah. All of that and everything else being said, and what you've seen over the last 9-10 years, is applied here also. Right. So the documentation. Most of the document is full of spaces. This is the agreement itself. I have noticed there are elements of being quite ambiguous, yeah, and generally rambles before coming to the actual point, and has either already been covered, otherwise they have forgotten to cover the reverse order of the original meaning. This is known as legal waffling, or just waffling, you know, as any other transcript may have actually come to an exacting point sooner. Right. Now, that being said, this then arcs me back to what we're saying about proposed interpretations. The idea is that as I've been reading through this, and yeah, I went through the whole 585 pages, 300 plus articles, 19 annexes, and a partridge in a pear tree, and, well, 8, how many have I got here? I think it's 9, isn't it? 2, 4, 6, 8, and 9 treaties stroke acts, yeah, spanning a 60-year period. Yeah, so there's a lot of information to go through, and I have read a good portion of them. Not obviously not all of the actual related documents. It's just them related segments, copies of them, and everything. So I understand what's going on. So I understand the lay of the land and what people are are implying, and what direction intended on going, or the intend on going. Yeah, so it's all there. Right, documents covering everything from the 1958 European Atomic Treaty, or Euratom, right through to 92 the Maastricht Treaty, right through to 2009 Lisbon Treaty. Now I've put 2018 in there because it brings you up to current date. It does, and you can also see the overlaps and how far things have come through and what's still in use. Yeah. Right, so besides others, this also references the period between 2000 and 2012 for referendums for proposed UK currency change, and 2016 referendum for the in-out of the Union. Right, now, in taking all that information into consideration, and taking into consideration where we're at now, so far what this comes across as is a reassertion of the EU rulings and regulations, meaning by way and means that through this agreement accept the changes derived from the 1975 EC referendum, or 72, because there's a bit of speculation between the dates, EC referendum, to now the dispute over or surrounding the changes made in 1993 for the formation of the political entity known now here as the Union. So as we were saying before, the dispute is in the terms of the referendum was not afforded, and so on and so forth. So, based on various inflexibilities, it's obviously rubbed people the wrong way, and here we are today. Yeah? How's that for a proper waffle? Looking at the rest of the document, bearing in mind, out of 585 pages, this document is actually less than 10% of that size. You're only looking, taking out the introduction part of 2 pages, you're actually looking at 12 pages. This is very short in the way of anything, really. What I have done, whilst there are many examples out there which again are inlaced with the document, within the document, are there variations of their interpretation of how things are looking. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. What this document is for is bringing forward particular aspects and looking at them in such a way whereas it's not trying to translate them, but it translates them and identifies particular points. Particular points that either need addressing, or otherwise it's a case of like, well, you've addressed these later on in the document, and if it's a draft document, then would it not have been a wise choice to then just sit down and say, right, these are all the points that we agree on, this is the direction that we want to head in, and just lay it all out in a very simple, straightforward manner, so everybody could have read it and the heads are not being sent all over the Wrekin. Yeah. In other words, they're not going to have to actually try and decipher the legal contexting or legal lexical markup to the point where they end up getting caught up in other paperwork, because believe you me, even I got halfway through, and for as much as I'm a strong reader, because again I take my time, so I'm conditioned in that regard, because I'm a strong reader, even I got bored. You know what I mean? Like, oh, really? Is there more? It's like an American program, Man vs. Food. He's chewing your way through it and he's like, we'll do it. And I did, managed to get through it. It was a bore, but nonetheless, there was a lot of stuff in it. So the idea was with this document is to basically compress it all, go through the document, go through the extended versions, or the extensions or the related documents, try and make sense of those in a brief enough manner as possible, bring them back into this document and create a much better understanding, not necessarily just to emphasize present an interpretation of the document, but also to offer again supervision as to the next steps forward. So, within that understanding, it's a bit of a good night read for you, isn't it? Yeah, so watching this video, there's a bit of a document to go, you can have a video in the background, listen to me banga, 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 in the background whilst you're peeling your way through the document going, oh my god, what have I got myself into? Oh my god. Yeah, and so on and so forth. So it covers everything from residency, social security, commuting, travelling, economic activities, qualifications, administration, law and acts, marketplace in itself, in which economic activities will work, so marketplace as a whole, as a collective economic business activities, VAT and duties, intellectual properties and rights, corporation and criminal matters, contractual and non-contractual matters, data and information processed or obtained, ongoing political procurement and similar procedures, Euratom, judicial proceedings, administrative procedures, administrative cooperation for matters related to indirect tax, privileges and immunities, so on and so on and so on and so forth, through to the indexes right at the end, which is where a part of Shadow Crown Services, SCS, is making its offer there. If I just skip back up to the top. The one thing to remember is that everybody must remember it doesn't change one way or another. It doesn't matter the interpretation, the perspective of the individual that carries that perspective or otherwise presenting that perspective. Come the end of this transition period, 2020, December 2020, one way or another, it separates the Union and the United Kingdom. They've already expressed as such, and they've said that is fine, effectively. Right? Everybody's agreed on that now. That's it. However, within that, and how we come back together again, is another thing. Because at the end of the day, the understanding has effectively been born out of the little historical timeline that I just gave you. For the United Kingdom, if things had been maintained as an economic community, I'm pretty certain there would not have been too many issues, because there would have been flexibilities afforded. Yeah? It's when two states become inflexible, they become rigid, and when time kicks in, that eventually erodes and things start to break apart. You know it even through your own monoliths and various other historical findings and so on and so on and so forth. If it's not done right and it's too rigid, even through modern day buildings, if it's too rigid, time and nature comes along, everything just falls flat on its face. Hence the same with now, the United Kingdom and various other countries within the European Union as it stands as the 27 members. Yeah, which is the other part of the news I was saying before. So I'm neither for or against. I'm the middle ground within all of this. The middle ground because consultation and supervision. When you start looking at all of this lot, there is room for improvement, because the problem you've got within all of this, because there's a lot of space, there's a lot of legal banter, it is a here of this, here of that, and this back forth, and so on and so forth. A lot of the document is broken up right across it, and that's what creates the 585 pages. If you were to take all that spacing out and really tidy it up, you could probably half the size of that. Like, for instance, when talking about residency, I've got it down to 2, 4, 6 paragraphs. Yeah. So all those entitled to as residing within the Union prior, during and within the transition period of the membership to stay in their respective places of states are secure prior to the exit and enjoy the entitlements afforded to the host's natural residence. How difficult is that? Yeah. Family members such as those born in that state or kingdom, or those whom are married or otherwise is their partner, are allowed residency. If residency is being capitalised on during or after transition, they may secure a visa free of charge and enter onto an accelerated procedure for entry. And then you've got the rest of the citizenship on top of that. Right, additionally, if I've lived in the host state of the kingdom for less than 5 years, but I've met minimum qualifications, they are also permitted to apply without issues. Acts back to this, doesn't it? Really, what I was saying about the other propositions or the proposals or the interpretations of the actual document itself, is that you've made a whole host of work for yourselves, right? And that's where we come in. People like myself, we look at this document, break it down, squash it together. These are the things that should be actually expressed in the first instance. This is what you've agreed on. It's not about lawful, this EC 2740/2017, or this, that's your part, that's their part. The idea is, this is what we've agreed on, this is what it means. Off and away you go. Yeah. Anyone not a citizen of the state of the kingdom or gains security prior to the exit must follow the usual routes to secure citizenship or otherwise economic involvement, are legally obliged to be tested for validity but must be given good reason for refusal. So, being flexible. They're not saying the door's closed, bugger off, not wanted. What it's saying is that it will just take a little bit longer to actually come through what is fundamentally an open door. It's not saying that nobody's allowed to come in and you have to be, strict with this and that and that and this and the other. There are going to be tests there, of course there are. Right? Do you have family members here already? Are you seeking employment? Do you have qualifications and so on and so forth to support the fact that you're seeking employment? Are you coming here for any other particular reason? So the upshot of it all is, it's just simply having a chat with you. That is. Rather than having people flooding through and making an entire mess of the entire system, and then that in itself collapses the system. Hence the reason why you had problems across in Germany. Yeah, this is for the EU. Where I was saying to you before that eventually it's going to happen to you guys. Yeah, I wasn't blowing steam out my backside when I was saying to you. Yeah. Again, it's all a par for course when it comes down to short and long range forecasting. Yeah, it is. It's not just for my benefit, your benefit, or their benefit, or anybody else's benefit. This is about identifying the path forward and looking at the cause and effect of your decisions. Yeah? And for those who are watching this, who are part of the European Union, part of the Kingdom on the other side, it is safe to say that you are safe. Right? If you're already there and you've been there for the last couple of years and you're still there but throughout the transition period, nobody's going to be booting you out, providing your presence is known. Yeah? Very simple. And that's the part that I think is actually rather fair. And to conduct it in any other way would actually be unfair, because the people have already set down roots and begun to grow their lives and family and so on and so forth. And to have this separation come along and tear people up and whatnot, well, that's just hugely unfair. It's irresponsible. Yeah. Social securities, it's all about participation. It is. You're paying your taxes, your national insurance. We all do it in one state or another. If the worst happens or we find ourselves unemployed for whatever the reason, we want to know that there's going to be a safety net there to help us put us back on our feet and to be able to get back within the economy again, get back earning again, building our lives, doing what we want to do with our time. Yeah, and then obviously come retirement, and as a pat on the back, as a reward, handshake, your time is now your own. Yeah, you're no longer obliged to actually participate economically. Time is your own. That's what retirement's all about. There it is. And that's why we pay into the system, why people get so upset about, I've paid in this, I'm supporting you for that and that and that and that. You don't need me to tell you, you already know that. Yeah? Right, commuting and travelling, while applicable to both awarded and natural residents, which is Union and Kingdom, all Kingdom, they're entitled to come and go as they see fit. It is best expressed as, in any event before, during or after membership exit, acquire and use a passport to travel anywhere. Right? What they're saying in there is, whilst free movement has been stopped, while free movement has been stopped, what they're saying is it's not, again, a closed door. The door is open. Right? However, we just need to see a bit of proof of who you are. The reason they've agreed on this is because of the issues that we just mentioned within the actual European bloc and the problems that had happened across the Central Asian bloc. That people were just flooding across and nobody knew who anybody was, and then we had all of this political and security issues and everything. It's evident. Nobody's blowing smoke out of their backsides. The idea is that these things are there for a reason. Because they are there now, the best way to move forward with it is quite literally just to make sure you've got a passport. It identifies who you are. Yeah, it's tailored, tagged to you and your identity and everything, and effectively it aids and assists with a smooth transition through borders. And if you've given nobody any reason to think otherwise, then you'll just go straight through, as you would with an open door policy. Yeah. So effectively, passport requirements are also applicable to supporting an application for residency, along with a criminal background check. So the upshot is now, not only is it for the United Kingdom's benefit, but it's for the European Union, or the Union's benefit, that we know the movement of people. They've already said themselves that have had criminal activities, and then criminals themselves, or those people part of criminal activities, be it in this state or the other, as in the Kingdom or the Union, have disappeared. Nobody knows who they are, where they've gone. Well, they've got a vague idea and whatnot. Yeah? It leaves our security agencies to try and pick up the threads of political or various political institutions' mistakes. So these little things, these little checks in there, are what will help smoothed a lot of the problems out that have happened over the last 60 years. Like I was saying to you before, 6 years in, which made it 2015, inside 6 years we've addressed 60 years worth of issues. Or what it is now, 9 years in, we're having to catch up and readdress and sort out 60 years worth of problems. Yeah? And so things have to be put in place. Remember, I'm not holistically in agreement with everything that's in the document, because yeah, I do believe there are certain word plays going on. There are certain hidden intentions. I wouldn't say hidden intentions as being malicious, but certainly that they're not willing to let go of things straight away, and they will try to drag things out. No, it's thereabouts inevitable. It is. So, in a prophetic fashion, we can expect one or two things to happen towards the end of the transition period. I do believe that there will actually be a call for an extension. Hey, call me wrong, it's not an issue. That's what, forecasting is all about. It's about understanding all the details, understanding the movement of things, and then saying, right, based on what I've seen, so it's not in itself entire facts, but what I've seen and what I've come to understand from what I've seen, this is what possibly would happen. And to be perfectly honest with you, it probably would be, give it, unless when it comes down to the Joint Committee and independent advisory supervisory institute on either side, or independent advisories on either side, the committees either side, depending on how amicable they are, I know I certainly would be, to a point whereas everybody on this side as well as the other would get what they need, is on the other side. Unless that actually was worked on and worked on appropriately, there shouldn't be any real reason for an extension period, unless come the end of the actual development or the transition period, everything had been done and it was recognised, something, we can indeed form a new agreement out of this. We can form a new agreement. We could form a new agreement. Could, as in now, can, as in then, form actually a new agreement out of this. Personally, I mentioned this back in 2016, if not a year or so before that. So, whilst not trying to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think it would have actually been as wise, instead of actually going through the whole rigmarole of referendums, arguments, negotiations, and an arbitrary being under arbiters and so on and so forth, which is going to be your committee in that regard, would have just been to roll back to and revisit the EC agreement. Yeah? Financial responsibilities, how much of an open door policy is this going to work on, so on and so on and so forth, and then just left it at that. Yeah? So, that's that part. So, economic activities within Chapter 2. It revolves around a few articles, a few other external articles, and what I've tried to do is try to, wherever I've seen the article, and I think it does hold relevance or there's question, I've also inlaid a link there as well, so you can hop off over to that part. So, based on laws of the individual economic states, either in or outside of the Union Agreement, such provisions as work visas may apply, as well as agreed frontier worker status. I'll come to that in a moment. If residency has been secured in the Union or the UK, then you've got your article. You'll be afforded all the usual rights given the usual residents, or given to the usual residents. So you're looking at employment laws, rights and equalities, pay, pension, PAYE, national insurance, etc. Unless specified otherwise, such as an absent parent, family integration applies to such assistance as education, further education, vocational qualifications, apprenticeships, etc. The same will apply to self-employed workers. Alright, then you move on to qualifications. Now, I said we'll cover that in a moment, is the frontier worker status, which then brings us on to when you're looking at citizen rights within the BBC's interpretation. I believe they're being covered in other people's interpretations as well, where it says British citizens in other EU countries, for example, still don't know whether they will be able to work across borders, which is known as your frontier worker status. Right? In the future, because their right to reside only applies to the specific country where they live, recognition of professional qualifications and access to university education on the same terms they have now are also unresolved issues. Not necessarily, because when you look underneath economic activities and qualifications and administration, as well as residency, so the first 3, 4, 5, 6 elements, so at pages 4 and 5, it does actually cover that, because what they're saying specifically over the transition period, that all normal rights, providing registration has been conducted, right, all normal rights will be afforded, such as the same as when it comes down to the economic side of things. Yeah? So it's a case of that will be down to the business to resolve as well. So you will actually have work visas to satisfy the actual frontier worker status. So when you're entering in and out of states, different states, they actually recognise who you are and what you're about, and in actual fact, once you finish your day or your week's work, you'll be heading back to another place, and so on and so forth. A lot of it's about traceability, again arcing back, which arcs back to commuting and travelling. Yeah? See, it does tie together. When you read this document, this is why I've said to you before, I think this is being gone about all wrong, right? And the interpretation that people are getting differ from industry to industry, because they haven't taken the two and then started to overlay them and see what's actually marrying up, and then learning to interpret what's intended by it all. However, that's not to say that it's exacting or that it's right. There is definitely a lot of work that needs to be done to it, so I'm in full agreement with anybody who says so. Also remember, as I can hear coming through, don't forget this is a draft version. Yeah? It's a draft version. So don't weigh everything purely and solely on this one particular document. Do what you've done now, and that's look at it and interpret whatever documents are coming through. You've done, for what I can see, you've all done a fantastic job of breaking this all down. But because this is a draft one, and you're all voicing your opinions and whatnot, and if Parliament on this side or the next say no to it, don't get disheartened. Take on board what you've got now, strip it all apart, find the common grounds, iron out them common grounds, leave it at that one common ground, not just one side and the other. This is what they say, because you will confuse the situation beyond what you're already doing. So, yeah. And then it leaves you room then to say, right, well, these are the parts that we don't agree on, and that's where people like myself come back in, and then we say, right, let's work this all out. Let's action everything that you've agreed on, right? Everything you've agreed on, and people don't have too much of an issue with, or it may need a bit of tweaking, but let's action that. Let's make sure that's being implemented, right? And let's work out the other details, right? Let's get this sorted. That then gets implemented. Yeah? But having an idea as to what to move forward towards after the transition period will help exponentially. This is to all the 28, currently 28 member states. Yeah? read through it, you'll find that there are priorities in there. There are a lot of common grounds in there. Granted, not everybody actually agrees with the document. I'm not saying that you should agree with it. What I am saying though is that make sure you understand everything that's been put in front of you. If you have got an opinion and it doesn't pass through Parliament, you make sure you put your opinion in writing and put it forward. Now, just to make sure, because I don't want to carry this on for too long. Now, yeah, let's do that bit and then I'll finish up with other bits. Right, I'm not trying to do judgment or be a judge or anything. I think personally I would actually make a pretty good one, given various aspects which I'll cover in a few minutes. It's more about the observations. Okay? I know that the margin of error within my observations are going to be very minimal, if any at all. Yeah. Why? It's because I placed too much time into reading these matters. Now, within all of these articles, I have actually highlighted where, for instance, the straightforwardness and vice versa is applied by way of EC regulation, and it's also ipso jure, operation of law. Yeah. Now, the idea is to go through it, so there's a bit of reading for you. It's not very long. It's easy, it's just to the point. I've tried to be as descriptive as possible, utilizing the same linguistics as the original document, so therefore making all paragraphs pretty short, to say the least. It includes everything through to privileges and immunities, as I've mentioned already, particularly when we're talking about in Article 117 to 119, pages 186 to 189, where you European Investment Bank, European Banking Authority, so on and so forth, is that when you're looking at immunities, on the grounds of reasonable nature and reasonable conduct, can privileges and immunities be afforded to anybody or all? Purely and simply is because what that does is then creates an environment to allow people to do as they will, and historically speaking is not actually a good thing, because it has been known to happen. It's where fraudulent activities come in, and you've seen it already when it comes down to embezzlements and so on and so forth. The idea is just be careful with them, right, when it comes down to this transition. Otherwise, when you're talking about competent folks or competent people, competent states, institutions and so on and so forth, yeah, obviously historically speaking, again, people have proven themselves. Being careful about what you're saying, that let it not be mistaken otherwise that the Bank of England is the central bank of England and is recognised as one of the central banking banks within our system within the United Kingdom, and as such with CBS, or the Central Bank of Scotland. Right? So it's being careful with how you actually address particular situations and scenarios, because it's things like that sometimes people will take in literal meaning as to say that you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. Yeah? Right. Then it gets down to Ireland and Northern Ireland. We're going through the recalling. Now it's understood and should be identified and recognised that they're coming out as well. There are other agreements, such as the Belfast Agreement, that has to be taken into consideration. And then a move through to implementation, application, supervision and enforcement. Now, There isn't a huge amount being placed on or within that section for Northern Ireland, because it seems to be that they don't agree within its entirety as to what's being said within the document. Yeah? Bearing in mind, this is not a temporary agreement with the intention of separation. That's how it comes across. There are too many ifs and buts between Articles 1, subsection 4 and Article 21 from page 330. Okay? No real agreements have been made as relating to Northern Ireland other than the prior articles, so far as the articles refer to the EU as the Union and the United Kingdom as including other adjoining territories. So what applies to us applies to the actual island. However, there's the issue with obviously the open borders and transition in economies, or economic trade and trading and whatnot. But I think by the time I've finished with all of this, the best thing for me to actually say in amongst all the annexes and the one that's point of interest, which is triggered off in terms of the judgment and the institutions and the joint committees and so on and so forth, is that we are looking at priorities. Right? Now, all of this is being born out of and was possible and being created out of, yes, my experience. Not only out of my experiences, but out of my academia, or my level of academia. Bearing in mind, I've got 25 years, and I mean literally speaking, 25 years combined working with people and businesses. Right? Everything from the front end, working with people themselves, from people who have been in troubled states to try and help them get themselves back on their feet, right through to national directors and so on and so forth, to help businesses, persons and businesses, actually develop and grow, come into life and grow. Yeah, designed, developed, managed, and have proven to be rather successful at whatever it is I apply myself to. In turn, any staff that I take on board will be of the same calibre, and there will be. Effectively, I've observed, learned and understood law, businesses and contracts, whether it be business contracts or civil contracts. Even wrote some pretty, should we say, effective contracts myself in recent years. This is over the recent years, as I said from the beginning. That's where my presence comes from, is the fact that I have a very well-rounded, should I say, understanding. Everything right from ground level right up to the top levels. Everything from NVQs right up to MSCs. Yeah, so it's a very consolidated, very tight and very clean, very tidy kind of like transition up that economic and academic level, like a ladder. So that's why when we look at consultation, it's very much like the arbiter. Yeah? So I'm not literally judging itself, I'm not professing to be one either. Judgment in itself is based on the arbitrary side of things, whereas I've had to mediate various things. Again, I'm not going into them, and I've been here for doing this for the last 10 years, which then puts things into better perspective here, especially for those who have been for those who are just joining us, and reinforces everything that everybody's seen who has followed me right throughout. Which then arcs me back before sorting out, finalising on the priorities when it comes down to the leadership contest. Before I signed off in 2015 to 2016, I actually said, when the last Prime Minister decided to give up his leadership by ways of means of an general election, the current Prime Minister took position and it says, leave things alone until the current Prime Minister has dealt with this agreement, which basically means March 2019. If there is a leadership contest, it is to happen thereafter. Why? It's not about dictating or telling you what to do or what you should think. Looking at this from all people's perspectives, to do so would, and I agree with what's been said, would throw this into complete and utter chaos. It would. You'd mess up the flow of it all. And no, for what I've been hearing, there isn't anybody currently who could actually, within the leadership realms, and I'm sorry to put this across, there isn't anybody within the leadership realms that I know of and currently finger point, like I say, that could actually do a better job than what's currently being done. Reason being is because it's what's happening on the other side of the pond. Yeah? You'll be faced up with the same thing. Now, not unless you know something nobody else does by ways of means of, shall we say, buttering your bread on the other side, then, and only then, it would put you in a negative position. So the best thing for me to say in this position, from an arbiter's point of view, is no. There'll be no leadership competition. Even if you get your 45 letters, it will happen, if it's going to happen, after March 2019. Yeah? Stick to it. Keep working on it. Now, to form part of the priorities, like for instance within reading and so on and so forth, yes, I agree with some that when we read through things, we end up adopting a lot of what people say to us. It forms part of our psyche, our subconscious, and then we act our lives out according to what we've learned and interpreted, and then interpreted that information to suit our needs, right? However, and in reality, beyond that adoption of that information, nobody's saying you have to adopt this information. It's like with this agreement, nobody's saying you have to actually adopt it. Best thing for you to do is to literally read through it, and if it resonates with you, which is as clear as by the sounds of things it's not resonating with too many people, then you don't adopt it, do you? You change it. That's the same with when it comes down to learning and development when we're talking about existentialism and essence. It's the same with anything else. You read to learn, you read to understand what's actually being said to you, and then if it resonates with you, then you adopt it. If not, then either put the book or the information down or change it so it actually better suits you, so it resonates better with you. Yeah? Right, based on that compatibilities and that resonating of information and the compatibility, a whole host of other stuff, it leads us back to the document in itself. Priorities and the document formation, which is the document formation itself. The document formation itself is based on agreed and disagreed. Now, we've already spoken about the document formation, right? The idea is now, instead of creating this grand 500 to 1,000 or whatever amount of pages, if something can be axed down to 250 pages, let's say for instance, then it should be axed down to 250 pages. And then you put your indexing along in the back end. The indexing for this document is within the document itself and at the front, as in the references and whatnot. So if you need to know about the references, you'll find that on pages 1 and 2, right? And then obviously references to other parts of the document are inlaid within the document itself, or inlaid within the texts themselves as hyperlinks. Yeah? They're not going to take you to any spam sites or anything like that, right? Well, I've tested them all and they dealt with me, so the document has been tested. Document formation: concise and to the point, descriptive but not overly descriptive, right? What parts do you agree on and which parts do you need to still agree on? That's where your two parts come in. The two parts that everybody agrees on, that needs to be worked on. In amongst everything else, you've already agreed on the fact that we've adopted a lot of laws, that's in, that's that, that's the other. Right, so the idea is now it needs to work on citizenship and economic movements. Right, start fast tracking issues. Right, fast tracking and issuing documents. Give assurances. So if somebody's got an application in already, send them a letter out and saying, right, you're being assured that we are dealing with it and it will get done, and it will just take time to process it. However, and if that's the case, and if it needs to be done, and if you can, fast track that through. Issue whatever necessary documents they are, if you've got all the actual necessary documents. There is no, because everybody seems to agree so far in one capacity or another about citizens' rights, in that if you're here and you have been here for X amount of years, they should be afforded or awarded citizenship. And likewise overseas, the assurances, this is within the member states also. Yeah, you need to make sure that the citizens that have actually applied for citizenship also get their assurances. Yeah, that they've got their documentation to prove that they're entitled to be there. No dragging your heels. Because of the way your system is built, if you're struggling with administrative costs, and it goes to the centre, it goes to the court, doesn't it? It goes to the commission itself. Yeah, and that gets filed through them, and you can pick up the track there of sorting out all the documentations. Economic movements, ensuring, giving out assurances, making sure people know that they're in good hands. That thing, just continue trading as normal, stop your worrying. Right? You've got approximately, you've got half a year on this process. You've still got up to around thereabouts 2 years. Right? 2 years, 1 month. Yeah, you're 2 years, 1 month. Yes, time flies by. Right? Personally, stop fretting. Right? Get your contingencies in place now, because one way or another, regulations and rules and so on and so forth will apply across the board, and be in one union state or another, whether it be across in the United Kingdom. Generally speaking, things will work out much the same and much the same way, no matter where you are. So having to worry about the burdens, taxation and so on and so forth is not going to do your business any good. Because what you've also got to remember is like I said before, come December 2020, who knows? Something else may come out of this which will benefit everybody. Yeah? So there's a lot there to take into consideration, and that document is what I've identified. Okay? But again, your priorities. Document formation is transparent, it's readable, people are not bouncing backwards and forwards to be able to try and identify the information. Yeah? Because even when I look at these propositions or interpretations, even them themselves don't specify everything within itself. What they've done is cherry picked. Now, I'm not saying there's a problem with cherry picking, not in the slightest, but what I'm saying is it's a lot of information for people to be working through. And if you want to build people's trust or gain their trust, then make it as clear as the interpretations you see within the mediums. Yeah? The same as you found within this document is that the fact that I've consolidated all of your information, articles 9 through to 15, again like I was saying before, 2, 4, 6 paragraphs. Social security in 2 paragraphs. I've turned a 585 page, fair enough, I've broken it down even to its bare bones as in a form of comment. But if I can turn a 585 page document into a 14 page document, or ultimately 12 pages, right? And you've got roughly the similar if not the same experience as I've got, I'm pretty certain that between you all, you can come up with something far more agreeable. Yeah? Something far more palatable for people to be able to work through. Would you not agree? Yes? Cool. Good on you. Right? So start working on it. Priorities. 3 priorities. You've got your document formation, so everybody across the board understands it, is clear as to the point, they can read it, they can understand it, and it's like, bang, fine. I don't have an issue with that. I do have an issue with that. Right? This is on both sides. Right? Citizenship and economics. Those are the 2 fundamentally important parts that you need to iron out. Right? Right? 585 pages is impressive, deserves a pat on the back, but at the same token, it's nothing worth it's not really worth boasting and bragging about, because, like I've said before, by the time I've finished reading through it, what have I got here? On page 14, as highlighted within the opening pages, once the transition has lapped, the agreement that will be withstanding are those the UK has adopted by virtue of historical relationship. These laws, while are evident in the operating activities, are pretty much those found either in the footer of each page and the separation agreement, or as expressed as an outline here in the documentation. Beyond this, the operation of political, economic and social relationships seem to be that of a working alliance and or state of friendship with confessional box benefits. That's kind of sums the entire document up, isn't it, really? For as much as I've always loved things to be that simple, granted I know it's not. But if I can compound or compile a new document out of yours and get all of that information down and summarised into my own, into less than a page, I'm sure you can do something else with it. Yeah? Document formation, citizenship, economic movements. We'll deal with borders and everything as and when they arise. Right? That's probably going to be the best way of actually dealing with this, because at least then we can identify some of the finer details, because within that transition period it affords another year to be able to iron that out, and at least then come the end of that year, if indeed you do need an extension, at least it's justified. Yeah? Right, I'm going to leave you on that note. We had a little over an hour. Right, again, the document's there. For those who are interested, there's all the links in it. Yeah, everything that I've had a browse through and read through, absorbed in, everything that the document talks about, that's the separate and the withdrawal agreement, that it involves are all in there. There's a bit of a historical timeline in there, so it really kind of like helps you to come to understand in its fullest form, without going into, well, in more of a rounded form, should I say, why things have come about and what other people have been talking about, and then you can lay on top of that all the finer details, which gives you a well and truly well-rounded appearance of what and feeling of what's actually happening and why. Okay. The upshot of all of this is it can be worked out. A good relationship can be formed out of this. It doesn't have to be as complex as it's being made out to be. Like I said before about simplicities and complexities. Yeah. Don't make it complex if it doesn't need to be. Don't be too overly simplified, or don't make it too simplified if it needs a bit of additional information in it. Yeah. Right, thank you very much for your time once again. It is appreciated. The sales spiel and banter or whatnot for Shadow Crown Services is legitimate. Between now and March, if needs be, I will put a little document together which will be comprised or otherwise highlighting further what page 1 emphasises there already and what we've been doing here. Okay, I think as a business, as an independent institution to help all of this unravel, as a supervisor, be it for the United Kingdom, in line with the actual joint committee, for other states and so on and so forth, however you want to work it out. You've seen it, you've witnessed it, the information I've put across, you've analysed it, you've realised it works. Yeah? What else can I say? Yeah, my forecasting is generally right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Like I say, a little bit of something for you to work through before your main meeting.